She woke up after giving birth to 4 babies and found 2 of them gone. No paperwork, no permission, just gone. 15 years later, she discovered they'd been sleeping in the house of the man who said he'd never be their father. He didn't know. She didn't know. And when a single newspaper photo brought the truth crashing down, 4 teenagers had to choose between the parents who raised them and the mother who never stopped searching. The moment Louise Grant's water broke, she knew something was wrong. Not just wrong catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. It was 11 weeks too early. The contractions hit like fists, and she was alone in an apartment with a leaking ceiling and no one to call. The storm outside matched the chaos in her body, rain hammering the windows, thunder shaking the walls. Louise gripped the kitchen counter and counted breaths until the ambulance arrived. She didn't pass out in the ambulance. She stayed conscious through every bump, every siren wail, every contraction that felt like her body was tearing itself apart from the inside. What she didn't know yet, what no one knew, was that she wasn't carrying 1 baby. She was carrying 4. And by morning, half of them would be gone. The delivery room smelled like antiseptic and panic. Louise had been in labor for 11 hours when the lights seemed to dim, not the actual lights, but something inside her. The pain had stopped registering as pain. Now it was just pressure, exhaustion. The far-off sense that her body was doing something she could no longer control. "Push," someone said. Louise pushed, and then she heard it. Crying. Not one voice, multiple. "Miss Grant," the doctor said, pulling off bloodied gloves, "you've delivered quadruplets." The word didn't land at first. Quadruplets. 4. Louise tried to sit up, but her arms gave out. Are they alive? Yes. Premature, but breathing. Breathing. That was all that mattered. They rolled 4 isolettes into the room one by one, tiny plastic boxes holding even tinier lives. Louise reached toward the first with shaking hands. A girl. Skin so thin Louise could see veins like rivers beneath the surface. Eyes squeezed shut, fists smaller than walnuts. "Gladys," Louise whispered. The nurse looked up, surprised. "You're naming her now?" "Yes. Because if Louise didn't claim them immediately, someone else might." She touched the second isolette. A boy. Same fragile translucence. Dark hair, already thick. Adam. Third isolette. Another girl. Longer fingers. A dimple Louise recognized with terrifying clarity. It matched the man who wasn't here, who'd never be here. Shirley. Fourth isolette. Another boy. Quieter than the others. Almost too still, but his chest rose and fell. George. Louise whispered all 4 names again, like a prayer. Like an oath. Like the only magic that could keep them tethered to her. But magic doesn't work on institutions. And institutions were already deciding her children's fate. The nurse who came in 2 hours later didn't meet Louise's eyes. Red flag number 1. "Miss Grant, the babies will need to stay in the NICU for observation." "For how long?" "We'll see. We'll see." The most dangerous phrase in medicine. It meant nothing. Promised nothing. Guaranteed nothing. Louise tried to stand. Her legs buckled. Pain tore through her abdomen, but she forced herself upright anyway, gripping the bed rail. "I want to see them." "You just did." "I want to hold them." The nurse's smile tightened in that specific way people smile when they're about to deliver bad news, gently. "Let's get you stabilized first." But stabilized never came. By morning, 2 of the isolettes were missing. Louise woke to silence where crying should have been. Her body ached everywhere, sharp pains, dull pains, pain she didn't have words for yet. But worse than the physical agony was the wrongness in the room. Too quiet. She forced her eyes open. Only 2 isolettes remained at the foot of her bed. Gladys, Shirley. The boys were gone. "Where are they?" Louise's voice came out hoarse, broken. A different nurse, the third one in 12 hours, checked a chart without looking up. "They've been transferred." "Transferred where?" "To a partner facility across the state. Their condition required specialized equipment." Louise's heart stopped, started again, slammed against her ribs. "When?" "Early this morning." "Why didn't anyone wake me?" The nurse finally met her eyes. "You were sedated." "Doctor's orders." Louise hadn't consented to sedation. She hadn't consented to any of this. "I need to see them," Louise said, forcing strength into her voice. "Take me to them." "They're not here anymore, Miss Grant." "Then tell me where they are." "I don't have that information." Lie. The word was a lie. Louise could see it in the way the nurse's shoulders tensed, in the way she held the chart like a shield. "I want to speak to whoever made this decision." That would be the hospital administrator. "He'll be available this afternoon." This afternoon. Hours away. An eternity, when your children have been taken. Louise reached for her phone with shaking hands. Cracked screen. Nearly dead battery. She tried to call the one person she'd memorized, a friend from her old job who'd promised to help if she needed anything. 4 rings. Voicemail. Louise hung up. There was no one to call. No partner, no parent. No family who cared enough to show up when it mattered. Just her, and 2 daughters, and 2 sons who'd been taken while she slept. The woman in the navy blazer arrived at 3 p.m. She moved like someone who made decisions other people had to live with, confident, polished, untouchable. Her name tag read, Cynthia Marsh, Child Protective Services. Louise's blood turned to ice. "Why are you here?" Louise asked, before Cynthia could sit. Cynthia sat anyway, opened a leather portfolio. "Because your situation has been flagged as high risk." "High risk for what?" "You're a single mother with no documented support system. You've just given birth to 4 premature infants requiring extensive medical care. The cost alone." "I'll pay." Louise's voice shook. "I'll figure it out." "With what income, Miss Grant?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. Louise had been working 2 part-time jobs before the pregnancy forced her to quit. She had $1,100 in savings, no degree, no family money, no partner contributing anything, because the partner had made it very clear he wanted nothing to do with this. Cynthia pulled a document from her portfolio and placed it on the bed. "Due to medical necessity and your current inability to provide adequate care, 2 of your children have been placed in emergency foster care, pending further evaluation." The room tilted. Louise grabbed the paper. The words swam. Legal jargon designed to sound official while meaning only one thing. Her sons had been taken. "I didn't sign anything," Louise whispered. "Parental consent isn't required when delay could endanger a child's welfare." "They weren't in danger. You said they were stable. They required specialized care you couldn't provide. So you stole them." Cynthia's expression didn't change. "We protected them. There's a difference." "Where are they?" "That information is confidential. They're my children. And the state is ensuring they survive." Cynthia stood, smoothing her blazer. "If you want them back, you'll need to prove you can care for 4 infants alone. Housing, income, support system. Until then, Adam and George remain in foster placement." She said their names like they were case numbers, like they weren't Louise's sons. Like 15 minutes of paperwork could erase biology, love, and 9 months of carrying them beneath her heart. "This says temporary," Louise said, voice breaking. "That means I get them back." Cynthia's face softened not with kindness, but with pity. "That depends on you." Then she left. And Louise sat there, staring at 2 sleeping daughters and 2 empty spaces, knowing that temporary was just a word people used when they didn't want to say forever. She didn't cry yet, because if she started, she'd never stop. And Gladys and Shirley needed her to be strong enough for 4. But what Louise didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that the man who denied these children was about to become their father anyway. And 15 years later, the truth would detonate in ways no one could survive unchanged. 6 months earlier, Louise Grant had been standing outside a building that looked like it was made entirely of glass and arrogance. The pregnancy test was in her purse, 2 pink lines that had appeared 3 days ago in a gas station bathroom. She'd stared at them until her vision blurred, until the fluorescent lights buzzed louder than her thoughts. Then she'd driven here, to Emilio Hurst, to the man who'd once told her she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed life. The Hearst Tower didn't look like a place where human problems belonged. 63 floors of steel and reflective glass. Louise had been here twice before, once for a charity gala where Emilio introduced her as a friend, and once late at night, when the building was empty and consequences felt impossible. That second visit was probably when it happened. Louise took the elevator to the 58th floor. Her reflection stared back from polished metal, hair pulled back, minimal makeup, an outfit that said, "I'm not here to beg." Except she was here to tell a man who'd spent his whole life avoiding commitment that he was about to become a father. The receptionist's smile was professional and cold. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he'll see me." Mr. Hurst is in meetings until... Tell him Louise is here. Something in her voice made the woman pick up the phone. 2 minutes later, Louise was walking down a hallway lined with awards, celebrating a man who knew how to build empires, but not how to stay present for anything that mattered. His office door was open. Emilio sat behind a desk the size of a small country, typing without looking up. Charcoal suit, perfect hair. That expression he wore when solving problems that required spreadsheets, not feelings. Louise. He still didn't look up. This isn't a good time. She closed the door. That got his attention. Emilio looked up, and for half a second, something softened in his face. The version of him that used to call her at midnight, just to hear her voice. The version that once said she made him feel human. Then the softness disappeared. I have a board meeting in 20 minutes. Louise sat down. This won't take long. She didn't know it yet, but the decision she was about to force him into would create a collision 15 years in the making. One that would shatter two families and rebuild them into something neither could predict. Emilio leaned back, fingers steepled. What's wrong? What's wrong? Like the only reason she'd come was because something broke. Louise pulled the pregnancy test from her purse, set it on the desk between his laptop and his awards. Emilio stared at it like she'd placed a live bomb. What is that? You know what it is. His eyes flicked from the test to her face. That's not possible. It's very possible. We were careful. Apparently not careful enough. Louise kept her voice steady, calm. She'd practiced this. I'm 8 weeks along. Emilio stood abruptly, walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, stared out at a city he could see but not touch from this height. How far along? His voice had gone flat. Clinical. I just told you, 8 weeks. And you're sure it's mine? The question landed like a slap. Louise's hands curled into fists in her lap. Yes. Emilio exhaled slowly, that controlled breath people take when they're trying not to explode. This wasn't part of the plan. I didn't plan it either. Then what do you want from me? Louise had asked herself that question for 3 days straight. Did she want him to be happy? To propose? To tell her everything would be okay? No. She just wanted him to care. I want you to know, she said quietly. Emilio turned, and the look on his face was something Louise had never seen before. Not anger. Not fear. Control slipping. I can't do this, he said. Do what? This. He gestured vaguely at her. At the test. At the inconvenient problem she'd become. I'm 3 months from the biggest acquisition of my career. I can't afford distractions. A baby isn't a distraction. It is if I didn't ask for one. Louise stood slowly. I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm not asking you to drop everything. I'm telling you that in 7 months, you're going to be a father. No. Emilio's voice was hard. Final. I'm not. Silence filled the space between them. What does that mean? Emilio walked back to his desk, picked up his phone, started scrolling like the conversation was already over. It means I won't acknowledge paternity. Legally or otherwise. You can't just... I can, and I will. I'll send money. Medical bills. Living expenses. Whatever you need. But don't ask me to be involved. Don't put my name on a birth certificate. Don't show up here expecting me to play father. Why? The word cracked. Emilio set the phone down. For 1 second, something human flickered in his eyes. Because I know who I am. And I know I'd destroy that kid the way my father destroyed me. Better to be absent than poison. Louise wanted to scream, to tell him he was wrong. But the look on his face told her he'd made this decision long before she walked in. I don't need your money, Louise said. Take it anyway. I won't. Emilio's jaw tightened. Then why did you come? Louise looked at him, really looked, and saw a man so terrified of becoming his father that he'd become something worse. A ghost. A person who chose legacy over life. I came here because I thought you deserved to know the truth. The truth is, I'm not father material. The truth is, you're a coward. Emilio flinched. Louise picked up the pregnancy test, dropped it in his trash bin, and walked to the door. She didn't slam it. She didn't cry. She just left. And Emilio stood there, alone in his glass tower, telling himself he'd made the right choice. What Emilio didn't know, what he couldn't know yet, was that Louise wasn't carrying 1 child. She was carrying 4. And 15 years later, 2 of them would be calling him dad, without knowing they were calling the man who'd rejected them before they took their first breath. Denial doesn't erase responsibility. It just delays the bill. And Emilio Hurst's bill was growing inside a woman he'd just sent away. The apartment Louise brought her daughters home to wasn't much. One bedroom, a kitchen with a stove that only worked on 2 burners, windows overlooking a parking lot where broken glass glittered like cruel diamonds in the sun. But it was hers. Gladys slept in a bassinet on the left side of the bed, Shirley on the right. Louise in the middle, barely sleeping, always listening for the sounds that meant something was wrong, a cough, a wheeze, silence that lasted too long. She'd been discharged with a folder full of medical instructions she couldn't afford to follow and a single sheet of paper with a phone number. For inquiries regarding temporary placement cases, Louise called that number 17 times in the first month. 17 voicemails. 0 responses. "I just want to know where my sons are," she'd say into the void. "I just want to know they're safe." The void never answered. So Louise did what she'd always done when the world refused to help. She survived. Night shift at a warehouse, repetitive work, barely enough pay. A neighbor named Mrs. Chen, 72, widowed, lonely, agreed to watch the girls in exchange for Sunday cleaning and grocery runs. It wasn't a system. It was a lifeline held together with desperation and gratitude. Gladys learned to sit up first, 5 months old, wobbling, determined, refusing to fall, even when her arms shook with effort. Louise had been folding laundry at 2 a.m., hands moving on autopilot, when she heard the small grunt of triumph. She turned. Gladys was upright, swaying slightly, grinning like she'd just conquered gravity. Louise dropped the towel she'd been holding and cried, not from joy alone, but from the knowledge that somewhere across the city, Adam and George were learning to sit up too, and she'd never see it. Shirley's first word was, "Mama." Louise had been stacking boxes, exhausted, running on 3 hours of sleep. "Mama." She spun around so fast, she knocked over the basket. Shirley stood in her crib, one hand gripping the rail, face lit up with discovery. "Mama," she said again, like it was the best word ever invented. Louise picked her up and held her until her arms burned. But even in that moment, a question screamed in the back of her mind. What are Adam and George's first words? And who gets to hear them? She didn't know yet that the answer would shatter everything she thought she understood about justice, fate, and the man who'd walked away. Across the city, in a penthouse, with floor-to-ceiling windows, and a nursery painted soft gray, Emilio Hurst stood watching 2 babies sleep. Adam in the crib on the left, George on the right. They'd been home for 3 weeks, and Emilio still couldn't believe they were real. The adoption had happened faster than expected. A coordinator named Saul had called on a Tuesday with urgency that didn't allow hesitation. "We have 2 newborns, brothers, premature but stable. They need immediate placement." Donna had been sitting beside Emilio. Her hand found his, squeezed once. "Yes," Emilio said without thinking. He'd spent years saying no to fatherhood, convincing himself he wasn't built for it. That his own father, cold, critical, present but absent, had poisoned the blueprint. But when the social worker placed Adam in his arms for the first time, something inside him cracked. The baby was so small, fragile in a way that terrified and anchored him simultaneously. When George cried sharp, insistent, Emilio reached for him instinctively, held both boys like he'd been doing it his entire life. "They're perfect," Donna whispered. Emilio couldn't speak. He just nodded. Now, standing in the nursery at 3 a.m., because he couldn't sleep, Emilio watched George's fingers curl in his sleep, watched Adam's breathing sync with his brother's. "I won't fail you," he whispered. "I don't know how to do this, but I won't fail you." What he didn't know, what the sealed adoption file never revealed, was that he'd already failed them before they were born, in a glass office where he'd called them a distraction and sent their mother away. The boys sleeping in his house were the same boys he'd denied, and he had no idea. Now here's what you need to understand about this story. It's not about good people and bad people. It's about 2 parents who loved the same children without knowing it. About a system that moved lives like paperwork. And about 4 kids who were born together, raised apart, and would spend 15 years not knowing the other half of them existed 15 miles away. Louise wrote her first letter to the state when the girls turned 1. "Dear Child Protective Services, It has been 1 year since my sons Adam and George were placed in temporary foster care. I have called 127 times. I have sent 14 formal requests. I have received 0 responses. I am employed. I am stable. I have housing. Please tell me what I need to do. Louise Grant. She sent it certified mail. 2 weeks later, the response arrived. Dear Ms. Grant, the children in question have been placed in permanent adoptive care. The case is closed. Records are sealed per state law. Louise read it 3 times before her hands started shaking. Permanent, closed, sealed. Words that felt like a door slamming on her chest. She ended up on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, letter crumpled in her fist. Gladys toddled over, dragging her stuffed rabbit. Mama sad? Louise pulled her close. Mama's okay, baby. But she wasn't. And Gladys, even at 1, seemed to know. Adam's first steps happened on a Sunday afternoon. Emilio had been reading a contract when Donna gasped, Emilio, look. Adam stood in the middle of the living room, hands out, face scrunched in concentration. 1 step. Another. He fell into Donna's arms, laughing. Emilio abandoned the contract, dropped to his knees. Come here, buddy. Adam looked at him, hesitated, then launched forward 3 wobbly steps straight into Emilio's chest. That's my boy, Emilio whispered. George watched from the couch, clapping. Emilio pulled him close, too, both boys in his lap, warm, solid, his. He thought about Louise sometimes, not often, but sometimes. Wondered if she'd kept the baby, wondered if it was a boy or girl, wondered if she hated him, but he never wondered if he'd made a mistake. Because looking at Adam and George, he couldn't imagine a world where he wasn't their father. What he didn't know, what he wouldn't discover for 15 more years, was that biology doesn't care about paperwork. And the truth he was running from was already sleeping in his house, calling him dad, carrying his DNA without either of them knowing. On their 3rd birthday, Louise baked 4 cupcakes. Chocolate with vanilla frosting, the girls' favorite. Gladys and Shirley blew out their candles together, giggling, frosting everywhere. The other 2 cupcakes sat untouched on the counter. Shirley tugged Louise's sleeve. Mama, why sad cupcakes? Louise knelt, smoothed Shirley's hair. Those are for your brothers. Where brothers? I don't know, baby, but I'm still looking. Except she wasn't, not anymore. Every door had closed, every inquiry denied, every legal path a dead end. Adam and George were gone. And all Louise could do was bake cupcakes they'd never eat. Across town, Emilio carried a fire truck-shaped cake into the living room while the boys shrieked with delight. Make a wish, Donna said, phone recording. The boys leaned forward, faces glowing in candlelight. Best day ever, George announced. Adam nodded seriously. Best day. Emilio smiled. But somewhere deep in his mind, so quiet he didn't notice a thought flickered. They have her eyes. He dismissed it. Because Emilio Hurst had spent 3 years becoming a father, and he had no idea he'd been one all along. You know what breaks my heart about stories like this? It's not just the separation. It's the years, the lost time, the moments that happen once and never again. If you've ever felt that kind of loss where someone you love is alive but unreachable, you understand what Louise carried every single day. And if these stories move you the way they move me, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button. Not because I'm asking for clicks, but because there's a whole community of us who understand that some pain doesn't get talked about enough. And when we share these stories, we're saying, I see you, your grief matters, you're not alone, that's why I'm here, that's why you're here. Let's keep showing up for each other. 15 years turned Louise Grant's hair silver at the temples, and carved lines around her eyes that told stories she'd never speak aloud. But her hands stayed steady when she measured flour. 4 cupcakes. Chocolate with vanilla frosting. Same recipe. Same ritual. Every year. May 14th. The Quadruplets' 15th birthday. Gladys sat at the kitchen table doing calculus homework, with the kind of focus that made her seem 30, not 15. She had Louise's cheekbones and something else, a watchfulness that came from growing up in a house where money was counted twice, and questions about missing brothers hung in the air like smoke you couldn't clear. Shirley was on the floor, painting her toenails electric blue, humming off-key through her earbuds. She'd inherited Louise's smile and learned early how to weaponize joy against sadness. "Mom," Shirley said without looking up, "you know we can't actually eat 4 cupcakes, right?" Louise didn't answer immediately. She'd stopped explaining years ago. "The extras are tradition." Gladys looked up from derivatives and limits. Her eyes green, sharp, knowing found Louise's face. "For them," she said quietly. Not a question, a confirmation. Louise nodded. "Now pay attention to what happens next. Because this ritual, these untouched cupcakes, they're about to become evidence. Proof. The thing that makes everything that's coming undeniable." Gladys had been 6 when she'd first asked why there were always extra cupcakes. Louise had told her the truth, or as much truth as a 6-year-old could carry. "You have 2 brothers. They were taken when you were babies. I don't know where they are." Gladys had processed this, like she processed everything, silently, completely, without drama. Then she'd asked, "Do they know about us?" Louise had said, "I don't think so, baby." Gladys had nodded and gone back to her coloring book like the conversation had been about the weather. But every year after, she'd helped frost the extra cupcakes. Shirley had been different. She'd cried, asked 100 questions Louise couldn't answer. Why did they take them? Where are they? Can't we find them? Eventually the questions had stopped. The hurt never did. Louise slid the cupcakes into the oven and set the timer. Through the kitchen window, she could see the parking lot where she'd taught both girls to ride bikes. Where Gladys had skinned her knee so badly, Louise carried her 3 blocks to the clinic. Where Shirley had written, "Love you, Mom," in sidewalk chalk that stayed visible for weeks until rain finally washed it away. 15 years in the same apartment. 15 years of night shifts and double shifts and working holidays when the pay was time and a half. 15 years of watching her daughters grow into extraordinary people. And 15 years of morning suns she'd never stopped loving. But what Louise didn't know, what she couldn't possibly know yet, was that in 3 weeks, one newspaper article would blow her entire world apart, and the truth she'd been searching for, it was about to find her instead. Across the city, in a house with a 3-car garage and a backyard basketball court Emilio had built when the boys turned 12, Adam Hurst was arguing with his brother about college applications. "Stanford has the better engineering program," Adam said. "Laptop open, spreadsheet visible, color-coded." George threw a pillow at his head. "Stanford is 3,000 miles away. That's the point. The point is to abandon your family. The point is to attend the best school." Emilio stood in the doorway, listening to them bicker with an argument they'd been having for months. Adam, logical, structured, already mapping his life in 5-year increments. George intuitive, loyal, terrified of the distance that came with growing up. They looked so alike, it was almost eerie. Same height, just over 6 feet now. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same stubborn set to their jaws when they thought they were right. But their personalities had split years ago. Adam collected data. George collected people. Adam planned. George improvised. Adam thought in systems. George thought in emotions. "You could both go to different schools and still be brothers," Emilio said from the doorway. They turned, surprised. "How long have you been standing there?" George asked. "Long enough to know you're both right and both impossible." George threw another pillow, this time at Emilio. Emilio caught it. "It's your birthday. Can you not kill each other for 24 hours? "No promises," George said, grinning. Donna appeared, carrying a cake with 15 lit candles. Places. Birthday photo time. They gathered. 2 boys, 2 parents. A family built on love and lies no one knew existed yet. "Make a wish," Donna said. They leaned over the cake together, faces glowing. Emilio watched them and felt the same thing he'd felt every year, pride mixed with terror. Pride that they were his. Terror that he'd somehow fail them. But 15 years in, they were good kids. Great kids. Adam was tracking toward valedictorian. George had been elected student body president. They fought like siblings and defended each other like soldiers. Emilio had done that. He and Donna. They'd taken 2 fragile newborns and raised them into young men who knew they were loved. Except those young men had been loved before Emilio ever held them. By a mother who'd named them in a hospital room while her body was still bleeding. By a woman who'd spent 15 years baking cupcakes for ghosts. And Emilio had no idea. The boys blew out the candles. "What'd you wish for?" Donna asked. George grinned. "Can't tell, or it won't come true." Adam rolled his eyes. "That's not how probability works. That's exactly how magic works." Emilio laughed, pulled them both into a hug they pretended to hate but leaned into anyway. What he didn't see, what he'd never thought to look for, was the baby picture still saved on Donna's phone. Adam and George, at 1 week old. Side by side, matching onesies. If Emilio had looked at the metadata, he would have seen the hospital name. The same hospital where Louise had given birth. The same night. But Emilio had never questioned the adoption. Never dug into the sealed file. Never wondered where these boys came from before they became his. Because he'd spent 15 years being their father, and that was the only truth that mattered. Until 3 weeks from now, when a newspaper article would prove that biology doesn't care about paperwork, and the children he'd denied were the same children he'd been raising. And nothing would ever be the same. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, Louise sat alone with 2 untouched cupcakes. She did this every year. Sat with them, stared at them. Imagine the boys who should be eating them. Were they tall? Did they laugh easily or hold things close? Did they know they had sisters? Did they think about the mother they'd lost? Or had they been told a story where Louise didn't exist at all? She picked up her phone, cracked screen, 3 years old, held together with a case, and typed the search she'd typed 1,000 times. How to find adopted children's sealed records. Same results. Sealed records cannot be accessed without court order. Birth parents have limited rights after finalization. Louise closed the browser. She'd tried lawyers. They cost money she didn't have. She'd tried investigators. Same problem. She'd tried social media, searching for boys the right age in her city. But she didn't even know their names anymore. Adam and George Grant had probably become Adam and George, someone else, living someone else's life. Louise wrapped the cupcakes in plastic wrap and put them in the freezer next to 14 other years' worth. Then she went to bed and dreamed of 4 children running toward her. She always woke up before they arrived. But in 3 weeks, Louise wouldn't be dreaming anymore. She'd be staring at a newspaper photo that would stop her heart, and the search that had consumed 15 years, it would be over. Not because she'd found them, but because they'd been hiding in plain sight the entire time. 3 weeks later, Emilio sat in his office scrolling through morning news alerts. He almost missed it. Local mother defies odds. Raises daughters alone after tragic separation. Something made him click. The photo loaded. 4 teenagers, 2 girls, 2 boys. All of them with green eyes that looked impossibly familiar. Emilio's breath caught. He read the article. Then read it again. Louise Grant, 41, has spent 15 years raising twin daughters Gladys and Shirley after a devastating separation at birth left her without her sons. "I think about them every day," Grant says. "I just hope they're loved." Twin daughters. Separated at birth. 15 years ago. Emilio scrolled back to the photo. Looked at the boys. Then looked at the framed picture on his desk, Adam and George at graduation. Same eyes. Same face structure. Same angle to their mouths. Same. No. Impossible. Emilio's hands started shaking. He grabbed his phone. Dialed the adoption coordinator from memory. "Emilio." Saul's voice was smooth, professional. "It's been years. What can I... Where did they come from?" Silence. "Who?" "Adam and George." "Where did they come from?" "That information is sealed. You know that." "I need to know." "Emilio." "I need to know." Pause. "I can't help you," Saul said quietly. "I'm sorry." He hung up. Emilio sat there, staring at Louise's face in the article. And for the first time in 15 years, the ground beneath him started to crumble. Emilio read the article 6 times before his coffee went cold. Each time, he told himself he was wrong, that green eyes weren't unique, that he was seeing patterns because guilt makes people see ghosts. But the 6th time, he stopped lying to himself. Louise Grant gave birth to quadruplets 15 years ago. 2 sons were placed for emergency adoption without her consent. She's been searching ever since. Quadruplets. Emergency adoption. 15 years ago. Same timeline as Adam and George's placement. Same city. Same hospital. He'd just checked the adoption paperwork he'd never thought to question. Emilio's stomach turned. He zoomed in on the photo until pixels blurred. That's when he saw it clearly. not just the eyes. George's smile, identical to the girl identified as Shirley. Adam's left eyebrow sitting slightly higher than his right, exactly like Gladys. The shape of their ears. The angle of their chins. Biology doesn't lie. Emilio stood so fast, his chair flew backward and slammed into the credenza. His vision tunneled. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape his chest. He braced himself against the desk, knuckles white, breathing shallow. He grabbed his keys and walked out without telling anyone where he was going. Emilio drove for an hour with no destination. His mind wouldn't stop. Louise had been 8 weeks pregnant when she came to his office. He denied paternity. Refused involvement. 6 months later, roughly the time it would take to deliver premature quadruplets, he'd adopted twin newborns. Brothers. Emergency placement. No questions asked. No questions asked. That phrase suddenly felt like a confession. Emilio pulled over on a side street and gripped the steering wheel until his hands went numb. If those boys were Louise's, if Louise had given birth to 4, if 2 had been taken and placed for adoption, then Adam and George, the sons he'd raised, loved, taught to throw a baseball and solve for X and navigate heartbreak, were the same sons he denied before they took their first breath. 15 years of being their father. 15 years of being the man who'd abandoned them. Both truths, simultaneously, unbearably. And in that moment, sitting in his car on a street he didn't recognize, Emilio Hurst finally understood what it meant to be destroyed by your own decisions. Not punished, destroyed. Torn apart by the realization that every good thing you'd built was standing on the bones of something you'd killed without knowing. His phone buzzed. Donna. Where are you? Boys, asking about dinner. Emilio stared at the words. Boys. His boys. Her boys. Their boys. He typed, work. Order without me. He couldn't go home yet. Not until he knew for certain. Not until he could prove he wasn't losing his mind. Not until he figured out what the hell he was supposed to do with the truth. Emilio showed up at Saul's office without warning. The receptionist tried to intercept him. Sir, you can't just... But Emilio was already through the door. Saul looked up, surprise flashing before settling into practiced neutrality. Emilio, I told you on the phone. I need the truth. Emilio closed the door. Were they Louise Grant's sons? Silence. I can't discuss. You were there. You processed the adoption. You know. Saul set down his pen carefully. Even if I did, those records are sealed by court order. I legally cannot. Were they hers? The pause was answer enough. Saul stood slowly. If you pursue this, you'll destroy lives. Yours, theirs, hers. Think very carefully. I already know the answer. I just need you to confirm it. I can't. Can't or won't? Both. Saul's expression shifted to something closer to pity. Those boys have a life now. A good one. Is it worth blowing up because you feel guilty? This isn't about guilt, isn't it? Saul leaned forward. You denied those children, then raised them. Now, you want credit for discovering a truth that should have been obvious from the start if you'd bothered to ask questions. The words hit like physical blows. Get a DNA test if you need proof, Saul continued. But understand the moment you confirm it, you can't unknow it, and you'll have to decide what kind of man you want to be. The one who walks away again, or the one who faces what he's done. Emilio sat in his car outside a pharmacy for 20 minutes before going inside. The DNA test was in aisle 7, between Band-Aids and thermometers. Clinical, impersonal. A box promising answers in 3 to 5 business days. He bought 2 kits, drove home. Sat in the driveway staring at the house where their family was eating dinner without him. His phone buzzed. Donna, you coming in or living in the car now? He looked up. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, worry carved into her face. Emilio grabbed the pharmacy bag and went inside. You've been strange for days, Donna said the moment he closed the door. What's going on? Work stuff. Try again. Emilio set the bag on the counter. I'm handling it. You're not fine. You've barely eaten. You're not sleeping. You left work in the middle of the day. Talk to me. Emilio wanted to show her the article, tell her everything. But how do you tell your wife that the children you adopted together might be your biological sons from a woman you got pregnant and abandoned? I just need a few days, he said. Donna studied him. She'd known him long enough to recognize when he was holding something back, but she also knew when to wait. "Okay," she said quietly, "a few days. But Emilio, whatever this is, don't shut me out." He nodded, waited until she went upstairs, then pulled out the DNA kit and stared at the instructions. Collect sample using provided swab. Seal in envelope. Mail to laboratory. Simple, irreversible. And what came back in that envelope 3 days later would confirm what Emilio already knew in his bones. That truth doesn't care about timing. That biology is patient. And that 15 years of love, built on a foundation of lies, was about to crack wide open. Sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. Sometimes it just shows you how long you've been living in a cage you built yourself. That's what gets me about Emilio's story. He's not a villain. He's a man who made one terrible choice and spent 15 years paying for it without knowing. And now that he knows, there's no easy answer, no clean resolution. If you're still here, still listening, still invested in what happens to these 4 kids and the parents who failed them in different ways, leave a comment. Tell me, would you want to know? If you were Emilio, would you take that DNA test? Or would you leave it alone and keep living the lie? I'm curious, because these questions, they don't have right answers, just human ones. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. These stories matter. Your voice in the comments matters. Let's build this community together. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday. Emilio had been checking his email obsessively for 3 days, refreshing, waiting, dreading the ping that would make this real. When it finally came, "Your DNA test results are ready," he was in a board meeting. He excused himself, locked his office door, sat at his desk with hands that wouldn't cooperate. The login took 3 tries. Then the screen loaded. Probability of paternity, 99.97%. Conclusion, cannot be excluded as biological father. The words blurred. Emilio forced himself to read them again. 99.97%. Not adoptive father. Biological father. He'd swabbed both boys' toothbrushes at 2 a.m. while they slept. Adam's and George's, separate samples sent to different labs. Both came back 99.97%. Collected his own sample in the bathroom like a criminal. Mailed both to separate labs so no one would connect them. And now, science had delivered a verdict 15 years overdue. Adam was his son, which meant George was too. Which meant Louise had been telling the truth when he'd called her a liar. Which meant he'd denied his own children, then raised them anyway without knowing. Emilio's chest locked up. He couldn't pull in air properly, just shallow gasps that didn't reach his lungs. The office walls pressed inward, his vision narrowed to a single point. He grabbed his keys before he could think, before he could rationalize, before he could talk himself into staying in this room that suddenly felt like a tomb. He needed answers, real ones, from the people who'd orchestrated this. Leonard Abels still worked at the same hospital. Leonard Abels, director of patient services. Emilio didn't make an appointment. He just walked in, past receptionists and nurses and bureaucrats who tried to stop him. Leonard's office was on the 4th floor. Emilio opened the door without knocking. Leonard looked up from his computer. "Mr. Hurst, I don't believe we have a meeting." "We don't." Emilio closed the door. "But we're having one now." Leonard set down his pen slowly. "If this is about a patient matter, this is about Louise Grant." The name landed like a stone. The name landed like a stone. Leonard's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "I'm not familiar with. Don't insult me by pretending you don't remember. 15 years ago. Quadruplets. Premature birth. 2 babies transferred for emergency adoption while the mother was sedated." Leonard folded his hands on his desk. "Patient information is confidential. Those patients are my sons." Silence. "I adopted them," Emilio continued. "Adam and George. Emergency placement. Closed adoption. I was told they were orphans who needed immediate care. Then you were told what you needed to know. I was told a lie." Leonard's jaw tightened. "We followed protocol. Everything was legal." "Legal doesn't mean right." "Mr. Hurst, I understand you're upset, but this office facilitated a lawful adoption during a medical crisis. The mother was unable to care for 4 premature infants. 2 required specialized care she couldn't provide. The state intervened. End of story. She never consented. Consent isn't required when a child's welfare is at stake. Emilio leaned forward. Did you know? When you processed that adoption, did you know I was the biological father? Leonard's silence stretched too long. The records were sealed before placement, he said finally. We don't cross-reference paternity denials with adoption placements. That's not how the system works. Then your system is broken. Perhaps, but it's the system we have. Leonard stood, signaling the conversation was over. If you want those records unsealed, you'll need a court order. Until then, I can't help you. Won't help me. Can't, won't. The result is the same. Leonard, open the door. I suggest you think carefully about what you're doing. Those boys have a life, a family. Digging up the past won't change what happened. It'll just hurt people who don't deserve it. Emilio wanted to argue, to rage, to make this man understand the magnitude of what he'd helped destroy. But Leonard's face told him everything he needed to know. The institution would protect itself. Always. Louise was folding laundry when the knock came. She wasn't expecting anyone. Mrs. Chen always called first. The girls were at school. She opened the door to find a man in a cheap suit holding a manila envelope. Louise Grant? Yes? You've been served. He handed her the envelope and walked away before she could ask questions. Louise stood in the doorway, envelope in hand, heart pounding for reasons she couldn't name yet. Inside was a single document. Notice of inquiry. Readoption case #47-WOT-B. You are hereby notified that a party involved in the above-referenced adoption case has requested access to sealed records. As the biological parent listed in said records, you have the right to respond within 30 days. Louise read it 3 times. Adoption case #47-WOT-B. Her sons. Someone was asking about her sons. Her hands started shaking. For 15 years, those records had been sealed, locked, inaccessible, no matter how many lawyers she'd consulted or letters she'd written. And now someone was digging. Who? The adoptive parents? The boys themselves? A lawyer working on their behalf? Louise sank onto the couch, document clutched in her fist. The notice included a number, an attorney's office she could call for more information. She dialed before she could talk herself out of it. Grayson and Associates. I received a notice, Louise said, voice unsteady. About an adoption inquiry. I need to know who filed it. I'll need your case number. Louise read it off. Typing sounds, a pause. That information is confidential unless both parties consent to contact. Can you tell me anything? Are my sons trying to find me? Another pause. Longer. I'm sorry, Miss Grant. I can only confirm that an inquiry has been filed. If you wish to respond, you can submit a formal statement indicating your willingness to be contacted. And if I do, then if the other party also consents, we can facilitate communication. Louise's throat tightened. How long does that take? It depends. Could be weeks, could be months. I've already waited 15 years. The woman on the other end softened. Then I hope it's fast for you, ma'am. Louise hung up, stared at the notice. Someone was looking. After all this time, someone was finally looking. And Louise had no idea if she was about to get her sons back or lose them all over again. The near miss happened on a Saturday. Gladys and Shirley were at the North District Library working on a group project. Louise had dropped them off at noon, promising to pick them up at 4. Adam and George were at the same library. Different floor, different section, but the same building. George had needed a book for his history paper, something about Cold War policy that Adam insisted wasn't in their home library. So they'd driven across town to the bigger branch. This place is massive, George said, wandering through the stacks. That's why they have what we need, Adam replied, already scanning call numbers. 2 floors up, Shirley was laughing at something Gladys had said when her phone died. Mom's gonna kill me if she shows up and can't find us, Shirley said. So go charge it downstairs. They have outlets by the reference desk. Shirley headed for the stairs. George was in the history section when his phone rang. Donna. He stepped into the stairwell for better reception. Mom, I can't hear you. The door opened. Shirley walked through. They stood 3 feet apart. Same green eyes, same dark hair, same angle to their jawline. Sorry, Shirley said, stepping around him. No problem, George said, phone still to his ear. And then she was gone. Down the stairs, around the corner, out of sight. George didn't think about it again. Neither did Shirley. Just two strangers passing in a stairwell. Siblings who'd been separated for 15 years, missing each other by seconds. Again. That night, Emilio sat at his desk at home, staring at the DNA results he'd printed. Donna knocked softly before entering. "The boys are asleep," she said. Then she saw the papers. "What's that?" Emilio looked up at the woman who'd stood beside him for 17 years. Who'd wanted children when he'd said no. Who'd loved Adam and George from the moment they'd come home. "Donna," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something." And for the first time in 15 years, Emilio Hurst stopped running from the truth. He told her everything. Donna didn't speak for a full minute after Emilio finished. She just sat there, hands folded in her lap, staring at the DNA results like they were written in a language she was still learning to read. Then she stood, walked to the window, looked out at the backyard where Adam and George had spent countless hours shooting hoops, arguing about nothing, growing up. "Say something," Emilio said quietly. Donna's voice came out flat, hollow. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Anything." She turned to face him. "You got someone pregnant 15 years ago, told her you wanted nothing to do with the baby, then unknowingly adopted your own biological children." She paused. "Did I miss anything?" "Donna, do they know?" Her voice cracked. "Adam and George, do they know?" "No." "Does she know? Louise?" "I don't think so." Donna laughed a broken sound that had nothing to do with humor. "So we're all just walking around with this bomb inside us, waiting for someone to light the fuse." Emilio moved toward her. She stepped back. "Don't," she said. I need a minute." But a minute turned into 5, then 10. Finally, Donna spoke again. "I can't believe you never told me. 17 years, Emilio. 17 years of marriage, and you never mentioned you got someone pregnant. It was before us. Before. It doesn't matter when it was. It matters that it happened. And now those boys upstairs, our boys, have a mother who's been searching for them, who baked cupcakes for them every birthday, who never stopped being their mother, even when the system said she wasn't." Emilio's throat tightened. "I know. Do you?" Donna's eyes glistened. "Because I don't think you do. I don't think you understand what this means. Those boys have 2 mothers now, 2 families, and the one they've known their entire lives is built on a lie. We didn't lie to them. We didn't tell them the truth. That's the same thing." Emilio had no response to that. Because she was right. Donna wiped her eyes, straightened her shoulders. "What happens now?" "I don't know." "Yes, you do. You filed that inquiry. You started this. So what happens now?" Emilio looked at the DNA results still sitting on his desk. "I think we need to tell them, Adam and George, before they find out some other way. And Louise, she deserves to know where her sons are." Donna nodded slowly. "Then do it." "But Emilio," she met his eyes, "when this all falls apart, and it will fall apart, don't expect me to hold us together. That's on you now." She left the room, and Emilio sat alone with the weight of 15 years pressing down on his chest. The call came 3 days later. Louise was at work night shift at the warehouse, stacking boxes that all looked the same when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. "Miss Grant?" A woman's voice, professional, careful. "Yes? This is Rebecca Grayson. I'm the attorney handling the inquiry into adoption case #47WB. I'm calling because the party who filed the request has agreed to disclose their identity." Louise's heart stopped. "Who?" she whispered. "His name is Emilio Hurst." The boxes Louise had been holding crashed to the floor. "Miss Grant, are you there?" Louise couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't process what she'd just heard. Emilio. Emilio Hurst. The man who'd denied paternity, who'd told her to leave, who'd wanted nothing to do with the babies she'd carried. "He adopted them," Louise said. It wasn't a question. Rebecca paused. "That information is sealed unless he adopted them." Louise's voice broke. "My sons. He adopted my sons." "Miss Grant, I can't confirm." "You don't have to." Louise sank onto a crate, phone pressed to her ear. "He's the one asking about the records." "Which means he knows. Which means he's had them this entire time." The attorney's silence was confirmation enough. "I need to see them," Louise said. "Mr. Hurst has requested a meeting. Neutral location. Just the 2 of you first, before involving the children. Would you be willing?" "When?" "Tomorrow." 2 o'clock. I'll text you the address. Louise hung up, stared at her hands. 15 years. 15 years of searching, grieving, baking cupcakes for ghosts. And her sons had been with him. The man who'd rejected them. The man who'd called them a mistake. Louise didn't know whether to scream or cry or drive to wherever Emilio Hurst lived and demand answers through his front door. Instead, she called her supervisor, told her she was sick, went home. The girls were asleep. Louise stood in their doorway, watching them breathe, and tried to imagine telling them their brothers had been found. That they'd been 15 miles away this whole time. That the man who'd abandoned them all had been raising half of them anyway. How did you explain something that cruel? How did you tell your daughters that the universe had this kind of sense of humor? Louise closed their door quietly and walked to the kitchen. Opened the freezer. Stared at 15 years' worth of frozen cupcakes she'd never been able to throw away. And finally she cried. Not the quiet tears she'd allowed herself over the years, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place she'd kept locked since the night they took her sons. She cried for the years she'd lost, for the first steps she'd missed, for the bedtime stories she'd never read, for the birthdays celebrated in separate homes, for the mother she'd been denied the chance to be, and for the impossible, unbearable truth that the man who'd rejected her children had become their father anyway. There was no justice in it, no poetry, just devastation wrapped in irony. The meeting was set for a coffee shop downtown neutral territory where neither of them had history. Emilio arrived first, sat in the corner booth, ordered nothing. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. Louise walked in 6 minutes late, wearing jeans and a jacket that had seen better years. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup, eyes red-rimmed like she hadn't slept. She spotted him immediately. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then Louise walked over and sat down across from him. The silence stretched so long, the barista glanced over nervously. "You look the same," Louise said finally. Her voice was steady. Too steady. The kind of steady that came from practice. "So do you," Emilio said. It was a lie. She looked exhausted, worn down. Like 15 years had taken more from her than time. Louise folded her hands on the table. "Tell me about my sons." "Not our sons. My sons." Emilio swallowed. They're good kids, great kids. Adam's planning to study engineering. George wants to do something with people, maybe psychology or social work. They're both smart, funny. They argue constantly, but they die for each other. Louise's jaw tightened. "Do they know about me?" "No." "Do they know you're their biological father?" "Not yet." "But you had the DNA test." "Yes." Louise's hands curled into fists. "How long have you known?" "A week. Maybe 2. "And before that, did you suspect?" Emilio hesitated. "Not until I saw the article." "The article?" Louise laughed bitter, broken. "I spent 15 years trying to find them through lawyers and investigators and phone calls that went nowhere. And you found out because of a newspaper photo." "Louise, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say my name like we're friends. Like we're partners in this. You denied those children before they were born. You sent me away. You told me you wanted nothing to do with them. I know. And then, you adopted them. I didn't know they were mine. Does that make it better?" Her voice rose slightly. The barista looked over again. Louise lowered it back down. "You raised my sons while I spent every birthday grieving them. Do you understand that? Every holiday, every milestone. I was mourning children who were alive, who were 15 miles away, who were sleeping in your house." Emilio's eyes burned. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't bring back 15 years. I know. Sorry doesn't give me back their first words, or their first steps, or the first time they lost a tooth. I know. So what good is it?" Louise's voice cracked. "What good is your apology when everything I lost is gone forever?" Emilio had no answer. Because she was right. Sorry was useless. Hollow. Insufficient. He'd stolen 15 years without knowing he was stealing them. And now the bill had come due. "What do you want?" Emilio asked quietly. Louise looked at him like he'd asked the stupidest question in the world. "I want my sons," she said. "I want Gladys and Shirley to meet their brothers. I want the family I should have had 15 years ago." "Okay. Okay," Louise repeated. That's it? Just okay? What else can I say? They're your sons. Biologically, legally, before the adoption. You deserve to know them. And you? What about your family? Your wife? The life you've built? Emilio's throat tightened. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to make it right. But I know we can't keep them apart anymore. They deserve to know the truth. All four of them. Louise stared at him for a long moment. Then she stood. Next week. I want to meet them next week. I'll arrange it. She turned to leave, then stopped. Emilio? Yeah. If you hurt them, if you disappoint them or let them down or make them feel like they were ever unwanted, I will make you regret every second of the 15 years you got that I didn't. It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And Emilio believed her. Emilio told Adam and George on a Sunday morning. They were in the kitchen. George was making pancakes badly, batter everywhere. Adam was complaining about the mess with the kind of precision only Adam possessed. Normal, ordinary. The last ordinary moment before everything changed. Boys, Emilio said, I need to talk to you about something. Adam looked up from his physics textbook. George flipped a pancake that landed half on the griddle, half on the counter. Sounds serious, George said. It is. Donna stood in the doorway. She'd wanted to be present, needed to be present. Even though every word Emilio was about to say would break something that couldn't be unbroken. Emilio sat down at the table. There's something about your adoption I didn't know. Something nobody knew until recently. Adam's expression shifted, curious, analytical. George's smile faded. What do you mean? Adam asked. Emilio pulled out the DNA results, set them on the table between the pancake batter and orange juice. I had these done a few weeks ago, after I saw an article about a woman who'd given birth to quadruplets 15 years ago and had 2 of her sons taken for adoption. George picked up the paper, scanned it. His face went pale. This says you're our biological father. Yes. Adam grabbed the paper from George's hands. Read it. Then, read it again. That's not possible. You adopted us. The adoption records were sealed. I didn't know. Emilio's voice cracked. I got someone pregnant 15 years ago. I denied paternity. I told her I wanted nothing to do with the baby. 3 months later, you were placed with us for adoption. I never connected it, never thought to ask, never knew. The silence that followed was suffocating. So you're saying, Adam said slowly, that you're our biological father. That you rejected us, and then adopted us without knowing we were yours. Yes? George stood abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor. Who's the mother? Her name is Louise Grant. She lives across town. She's been searching for you for 15 years. And our sisters? George's voice was barely audible. The article said, quadruplets. Where are they? Emilio met his eyes. She raised them. Gladys and Shirley. They're your age. They don't know about you yet. Adam's hands were shaking. Why are you telling us this now? Because Louise wants to meet you. And because you deserve to know the truth. The truth, Adam repeated. He laughed sharp, bitter. The truth is, you abandoned us before we were born. The truth is, we've been living with the man who rejected us our entire lives. The truth is, our mother has been out there somewhere grieving while you. He stopped, stood, walked out. George followed. The front door slammed. Donna finally moved from the doorway, sat down in the chair Adam had vacated. That went well. Emilio dropped his head into his hands. And upstairs? 2 boys sat in their shared room, trying to understand how their entire identity had been rewritten in 5 minutes. Louise told Gladys and Shirley that same afternoon. They were in the living room. Shirley was painting her nails. Gladys was reading, always somewhere else. Girls, Louise said. Her voice shook, despite her best efforts to steady it. I found them. Gladys looked up first. She didn't ask who. She already knew. Your brothers, Louise continued. I found your brothers. Shirley's nail polish bottle clattered onto the coffee table. What? Their names are Adam and George. They're 15. They live about 20 minutes from here. How? Gladys asked. Always practical. Always needing the mechanics before the emotion. The man who's their father, their adoptive father, he's also their biological father. He didn't know when he adopted them, but he knows now. Shirley's eyes widened. Wait, their adoptive dad is actually their real dad? Yes. And is he your? Louise nodded. Yes. Emilio Hurst, the man I told you about, the one who didn't want to be involved. Gladys closed her book slowly. So he denied paternity, then unknowingly adopted his own children, and now 15 years later everyone knows the truth. Yes. That's, Shirley searched for words. That's insane. I know. When do we meet them? Gladys asked. Always practical. Next Saturday, if you want to. Of course we want to, Shirley said immediately. Then she paused. Don't we? She looked at Gladys. Gladys was quiet for a long moment. Do they know about us? They do now. Their father told them this morning. And they want to meet us? Louise hesitated. I don't know yet. It's a lot for everyone. Gladys nodded. Opened her book again. But Louise could tell she wasn't reading. Her eyes weren't moving. Gladys, Louise said softly. I'm fine. You don't have to be fine. I know. Gladys looked up. Her eyes were dry, but something behind them was breaking. I just spent 15 years knowing I had brothers I'd never meet. And now I'm about to meet them and I don't know if I'm ready. Shirley moved to sit beside her. Put her head on Gladys's shoulder. We don't have to be ready, Shirley said. We just have to show up. The confrontation happened on Wednesday. Gladys had done what Gladys always did when she needed answers: research. She'd found Emilio Hurst's business address online, found his office hours, found the building where he worked. And at 4:30 p.m., she and Shirley walked into the Hearst Tower lobby like they belonged there. We're here to see Emilio Hurst, Gladys told the receptionist. Do you have an appointment? We're his daughters. The receptionist blinked, confused. Mr. Hurst doesn't have. Call him, Gladys said. Tell him Gladys and Shirley Grant are here. 5 minutes later, they were in the elevator. 58th floor. Same office where Louise had stood 15 years ago and been sent away. Emilio met them at the elevator. He looked like he'd aged a decade in a week, tired, hollowed out, bracing for impact. You shouldn't be here, he said. Probably not, Gladys agreed. But we are. They followed him to his office. The door closed. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Shirley broke the silence. You're really our father? Biologically, yes. But you didn't want to be. Emilio flinched. No, I didn't. Why? Gladys asked. Not angry, just genuinely curious. What was so wrong with us that you couldn't even try? Nothing was wrong with you. Everything was wrong with me. That's not an answer. Emilio sat down heavily. I was terrified. My own father was cruel and distant, and I convinced myself I'd be the same, so I walked away before I could prove myself right. But then you adopted Adam and George, Shirley said. So you weren't too scared to be a father. You were just too scared to be our father. The words landed like a verdict. Emilio looked at these two girls, his daughters, strangers, accusers, and saw Louise in both of them. Gladys had her directness. Shirley had her warmth. I'm sorry, he said. Our mom spent 15 years looking for them. Gladys said. Did you know that? Every birthday she baked 4 cupcakes. 2 for us, 2 for the brothers we'd never met. She never stopped being their mother, even when the system said she wasn't. I know. Do you? Shirley's voice rose. Because from where we're sitting, you got everything. You got to raise our brothers. You got to be their dad. You got to have a family. And our mom got nothing but grief and frozen cupcakes. Emilio's throat tightened. You're right. We don't want you to agree with us, Gladys said quietly. We want you to fix it. I don't know how. You start by making sure Adam and George know they were never unwanted, that our mom never stopped loving them, that this wasn't their fault. They know. Do they? Because if I just found out my father rejected me before I was born, I'd have a hard time believing anything he said. Emilio had no response, because she was absolutely right. The meeting was scheduled for Saturday at a park halfway between both homes. Neutral ground, open space, easy exit if anyone needed it. Louise arrived first with Gladys and Shirley. They sat at a picnic table near the playground, watching families that looked simpler than theirs. Emilio arrived 10 minutes later with Adam, George, and Donna. The 4 teenagers saw each other first, stopped walking, stared. It was like looking in a mirror that had been broken 15 years ago and was finally being held together again. Same eyes, same posture, same angle to their shoulders. Biology didn't lie. Adam was the first to move. He walked forward slowly, stopping a few feet away. "Gladys?" he asked. She nodded. "Adam?" "Yeah." George stood beside his brother, Shirley beside her sister. 4 people who'd been divided at birth, standing together for the first time since they were hours old. Nobody knew what to say. So Shirley did what Shirley did best. She broke the tension. "So," she said, "this is weird, right?" George laughed. "So weird. Do we hug? Shake hands? Take a DNA test to confirm?" "Pretty sure we don't need another DNA test," Adam said dryly. And just like that, the ice cracked. Not broken, not melted, but cracked enough to let something through. Louise and Emilio stood back, watching. "They look like us," Donna said quietly. She was looking at Gladys and Shirley. Louise glanced at her, this woman who'd raised her sons, loved them, been their mother in every way that mattered. "Thank you," Louise said. Donna turned. "For what?" "For loving them. For being there when I couldn't be. For making sure they knew they were wanted." Donna's eyes filled. They were always wanted. "I know. I can see it." The 2 women stood side by side, watching 4 teenagers figure out how to be siblings. And Emilio stood apart, knowing that this family, whatever shape it took, would be built by the children, not the parents. Because parents don't own children. Children choose their parents. And these 4 were about to decide what family meant. Here's what I want you to remember about this moment. Those 4 kids standing in a park, meeting for the first time, trying to figure out how to be siblings after 15 years apart? They're braver than any of the adults in this story. They didn't create this mess. They didn't make the choices that separated them. But they're the ones who have to live with it. And instead of running, instead of blaming, instead of choosing sides, they're showing up. That's what courage looks like. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, I need you to do something. Share this video. Not for the algorithm. Not for me. Share it because somewhere out there is someone who needs to know that broken families can be rebuilt. That lost time doesn't mean lost forever. That forgiveness isn't about excusing what happened, it's about choosing what happens next. Drop a like if you're still here. Comment and tell me what you think these kids should do. And subscribe, because we're about to find out how this ends. Time doesn't put families back together. People do slowly, unevenly, and with their hands still shaking. The lawyers wanted to call it a post-adoption contact agreement. Louise called it something else. "Access," she said, sitting at the polished conference table between her attorney and Emilio's. "I'm not trying to erase what they have. I'm trying to stop pretending I don't exist." Across from her, Emilio listened without interrupting. Donna sat beside him, hands folded, knuckles white. The proposal on the table wasn't simple, but it was survivable. Joint decision-making on major medical and educational issues. Scheduled weekends where Adam and George would stay with Louise and the girls. Holidays split, not along neat lines, but negotiated year by year. Weekly family dinners where all 4 teenagers were expected to show up no matter whose house hosted. "It's not full custody," Louise's attorney murmured, just loud enough for her to hear. "But it's recognition, and it's enforceable." Louise looked at the stack of paper. 15 years ago, signatures had been used against her. Now, they were the only way forward. "I'll sign," she said. Everyone looked at Emilio. He picked up the pen. For a moment, he hesitated, not because he was unsure, but because he finally understood the weight of his name on paper. 15 years ago, he'd refused to let it appear on a birth certificate. Today, he wrote it on an agreement that said, in legal language and black ink, that these 4 children belonged to more than one home. He signed. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like a beginning he didn't deserve but would not waste. The press conference was Emilio's idea. Louise hadn't asked for it. If anything, she'd wanted less attention, not more. But the story had already escaped them. The article about the separated quadruplets reunited after 15 years had gone from local human interest piece to regional headline. The comments were vicious in places, sympathetic in others. Everyone had an opinion. Few had the facts. "I need to say it myself," Emilio told Donna the night before. "Not through a publicist, not in a carefully worded statement. Me. And if they tear you apart," she asked, "then I'll have been torn apart in public the way I should have been a long time ago." Louise agreed to stand with him on one condition. "You don't paint yourself as a hero," she said. "This doesn't become a story about Look how he stepped up in the end. You tell the truth, the ugly kind. Agreed. The day of the conference, they stood side by side at a podium in a modest hotel ballroom, not a glossy corporate stage. The quadruplets were there, but seated off to the side, out of the direct camera line. Donna sat with them. Emilio adjusted the microphone. My name is Emilio Hurst, he began. 15 years ago, I made a decision I will regret for the rest of my life. When Louise told me she was pregnant, I denied that the child was mine. I refused to be involved. I told myself I was protecting a future I thought was more important than any life I might have helped create. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at Louise. I was wrong. Flashbulbs popped. Questions were already forming in reporters' eyes. He kept going. Months after that denial, my wife and I adopted twin boys through an emergency placement. I was told they were in need of a home. I didn't ask enough questions about where they'd come from. Recently, I learned through DNA testing and legal inquiry that those boys are my biological sons, that they were taken from the same woman I had turned away. He swallowed. This is not a story about fate being romantic. It's a story about systems that move children like files, and about a man who let fear excuse cowardice. Louise raised our daughters alone. She searched for our sons alone. Every year, she baked 4 cupcakes for 4 children, even when only 2 were at the table. Louise's eyes shone, but she didn't look away. I cannot undo what I've done, Emilio said, but I can stand here and say it plainly. I was their father by biology, long before I was their father by adoption. I denied that truth. The cost of that denial has been paid by 4 teenagers and 1 extraordinary woman, not by me. That changes today. He stepped back. Louise stepped forward, not to soften his confession, but to anchor it. I didn't come here for revenge, she said. If I wanted that, I'd have disappeared the moment I found out where my sons were and let him drown in his own guilt. I came here because my children deserve to see adults take responsibility. Not just in private, out loud. She glanced at the 4 of them. Family is not a prize you win in court, she said. It's work, it's presence, it's showing up even when the story is ugly. We're going to be figuring out what that looks like for a long time. But for the first time in 15 years, we're at least starting from the truth. There were questions, dozens of them. Some deserved answers, some didn't. They gave what they could. The rest, they saved for their children. The practical part of reunification was not cinematic. It was calendars and carpools. It was tense Tuesdays where Adam looked like he wanted to be anywhere but Louise's tiny apartment. It was Saturdays where George and Shirley bonded over music playlists, while Gladys and Adam argued about politics and the ethics of systems that had failed them. It was Donna teaching Gladys how to drive, because Louise's car didn't handle highway speeds well. It was Louise showing George how to make the cheap, filling soup she'd lived on for years of night shifts. It was 4 kids, learning that brother and sister are muscles you build them with repetition, not DNA alone. There were missteps. The first time Adam called Louise Mom by accident, he went silent for an hour afterward, horrified at his own slip. She pretended not to notice. That night, he sent her a text. I'm sorry if that was weird today. Her reply took 3 minutes. It was beautiful, and you never have to say it again if you don't want to, but if you do, I'll always answer. He stared at the screen for a long time, then typed, okay. He didn't say it again for weeks. When he did, it was because he was sick, and she'd shown up at Emilio's house with the same stubborn insistence she'd once used on social workers. You've got a fever and a calculus test, she'd said. I'm not letting you fail either. He'd mumbled, thanks, Mom, half-conscious, and this time, neither of them pretended not to hear it. Gladys took the longest to trust Emilio. She went to therapy, Louise insisted, and Emilio paid for it without comment. She asked hard questions and refused easy answers. One afternoon, months after the park meeting, she met Emilio at a coffee shop. Same chain as the first time he and Louise had faced each other. Different location. I need to say this once, she told him, so we don't spend the next 10 years stepping around it. Okay. You hurt my mother in ways you will never fully understand. You stole years from her, from us, from Adam and George. Whatever relationship you and I build, it will not erase that. You don't get a clean slate with me. He nodded. I don't expect one. But, she continued, I see how my brothers look at you. I see how Donna looks at you. You showed up for them. You are still showing up. I care about that. So I'm willing to try. Not for you. For them. For us. For her. Holding both things at once, he said quietly. Exactly. You're the man who abandoned us. And you're the man who raised them. I won't forget either. It wasn't forgiveness. It was something sturdier. A boundary that left space for a bridge. The first time all four of them slept under the same roof, it was at Louise's apartment. Not because it was comfortable, it wasn't, but because the girls insisted. This is where it started, Shirley said. It should get at least one memory, with all of us. They dragged mattresses into the living room. Adam nearly hit his head on the low-hanging light. George laughed until he choked, when he realized Louise still used the same dented saucepan she'd had since they were born. They ordered pizza they couldn't really afford, then ended up eating leftover soup anyway, because Shirley declared it better than anything in a box. Later, in the dark, four silhouettes sprawled across the floor, voices overlapping. Do you ever feel like you grew up in the wrong movie? George asked. All the time, Shirley replied. I feel like someone hit shuffle on my life, Adam said. Like I was supposed to be here, but I spawned in the wrong starting location. Gladys was quiet for a long moment. I feel like there was never a right version. Just this one. Messy. Late. But ours. Deep, George muttered. Very on brand. They laughed. Someone suggested a group chat name. After 20 minutes of terrible ideas, they landed on one that stuck. 4 anyway. Because no matter what the adults had done, no matter what the system had signed, no matter what had been stolen, they were still 4. Anyway. A year after the article, Emilio stood in the kitchen of Louise's apartment, frosting 4 cupcakes. He was terrible at it. The swirls were uneven. One tilted so badly it looked like it might slide off the edge. Here, Louise said, taking the knife gently. You're overthinking it. Story of my life. She finished the last one, set them on the table. Gladys and Adam came in, arguing about something that sounded like philosophy. Shirley and George followed, still bickering about whose turn it was to choose the movie for later. Places, Donna called from the doorway, holding up her phone. I'm on birthday photo duty. They gathered around the table. 4 teenagers, 2 mothers, 1 father who was no longer just running from who he'd been, but showing up for who he could still be. 15 plus 1, Shirley said. Feels different. It is different, Louise replied. We're doing it right this time. Not perfectly, Emilio said. Perfect was never on the table, Gladys answered. Present is good enough. They lit 4 candles. No empty spaces this year. Make a wish, Donna said. They shared a look. Unspoken agreement. Later, they joked that it was cheesy, that wishing together like that felt like something out of a movie. But in the moment, they all closed their eyes. And for the first time since a stormy night 15 years earlier, the wish wasn't about finding each other. It was about keeping what they'd finally begun to build. When they opened their eyes, 4 flames flickered. They blew them out together. The room smelled like smoke and sugar. Not restored. Rebuilt. Not perfect. But, at last, theirs. Family isn't about who you started with. It's about who shows up when everything falls apart. Louise showed up for 15 years, baking cupcakes, writing letters, never stopping. Emilio showed up when it mattered most, confessing publicly, facing his failures, choosing truth over comfort. Donna showed up by making space for a woman she'd never met to mother the sons she'd raised. And those 4 kids? They showed up for each other. That's the story. Not the separation, not the scandal, not the DNA test. The showing up. If you made it this far, thank you. Thank you for witnessing this family rebuild itself. Thank you for caring about 4 kids who deserved better and got it eventually, messily, imperfectly. Leave a comment and tell me, what would you have done? How would you have handled this? And if you haven't subscribed yet, if you've been watching but haven't committed, do it now. Because this community, we show up for each other too. Hit that subscribe button. Like this video. Share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And I'll see you in the next story. Because there's always another story. And we're in this together.